I don't think reality works the way physics says it does. And before you dismiss that as arrogance or pseudoscience, hear me out. Because lately, the more I learn about the laws that are supposed to explain the universe, motion, matter, time, even space, the more they feel like a set of clever illusions. Equations that predict everything but explain nothing. We're told reality is a stable thing, that what exists, exists, and what doesn't, doesn't. But then you stare at the quantum world, and that neat certainty begins to dissolve. Particles appear and vanish, teleport across space, and change their behavior depending on whether you're watching. Observation, your awareness, reshapes the event itself. That's not a mechanical universe. That's a participatory one. And if the act of seeing can rewrite what is, then the story we've built around objective physics starts to feel incomplete, maybe even wrong. I've met physicists who whisper the same thing in private, that deep down, they don't fully believe their own equations anymore. They sense a gap between the world we measure and the world we experience, between data and consciousness. What if reality isn't a system of laws, but a dialogue between awareness and potential? What if physics describes the rules of the game, but not the reason the game exists? Let's go deeper, into the cracks between observation and existence, where the illusion of certainty begins to break. The first time I realized physics might be describing a map, not the territory, was when I looked into the double-slit experiment. You've probably heard of it, the experiment that broke reality. You fire particles, tiny pieces of matter, through two slits and watch what happens on a screen behind them. If you don't observe which slit they go through, they act like waves, creating an interference pattern as if each particle passes through both slits simultaneously. But the moment you measure which slit it travels through, that ghostly wave collapses. The particle chooses one path, as if your awareness forced it to make up its mind. That shouldn't happen. Physics says observation shouldn't change the outcome. It should only reveal it. But here, observation is creative. It decides the story after it's told. So what is the mechanism? How can something so small, an electron, a photon, know it's being watched? One possibility is that it doesn't know anything. Instead, the universe exists as a cloud of possibilities, a quantum superposition until consciousness interacts with it. Physics tries to reduce this to wave function collapse, but the math alone doesn't tell us why it collapses. That missing piece is what's driving some scientists to the edge of philosophy. Maybe reality is a negotiation between mind and matter. Consciousness doesn't merely register the world, it co-authors it. And this is where things get strange, because if you take that idea seriously, it means that the act of measurement isn't physical at all. It's informational. The universe isn't built from particles. It's built from bits of awareness interacting with probabilities. Physics describes the probabilities, but awareness decides which ones crystallize into facts. This view, sometimes called participatory realism, implies that physics doesn't describe what is, only what becomes when you look, and that becoming may depend on something outside the equations entirely. Einstein hated this idea. "Do you really believe the moon isn't there if you're not looking at it?" he once asked. But maybe that question misunderstands the game. The moon is always there, yes, but what there means may not be fixed until observation calls it into focus. So, if observation defines reality, then who or what is doing the observing when no one's watching? If reality depends on observation, then we face a terrifying and beautiful question. What if there is no universe out there at all? That sounds insane, right? Yet every time science digs into the quantum world, that's the message it keeps whispering back. We think of the world as something that exists independently, whether we're here or not. Trees grow, stars burn, atoms spin. But quantum mechanics keeps showing us that existence isn't a static photograph. It's a movie that only plays when the projector, consciousness, is on. The illusion we call objectivity is like a shared dream, stabilized by agreement. We all see the same table because we're all tuning into the same frequency of possibility. Physics calls that decoherence, the moment when quantum fuzziness solidifies into a classical outcome. But even decoherence doesn't explain why the fuzziness disappears. It just describes the moment it does. Maybe what we call matter is just mind that has forgotten itself. Maybe the universe is awareness looping back on its own potential, sculpting form from formlessness. I remember reading a thought experiment by physicist John Wheeler, the delayed choice experiment. He asked, What if our present observation can decide how a particle behaved in the past? And it turns out, it can. When tested, photons acted as if they knew how they'd be observed, retroactively deciding whether they'd been waves or particles. The observer wasn't just influencing the future, but rewriting the past. That's when the cracks in our normal story begin to widen. Because if the past itself is malleable, if events aren't fully real until they're observed, then what exactly are we standing on? Causality, the sacred chain that links cause and effect, starts to unravel. Time stops being a one-way street. The present can sculpt the past, and the future might already be echoing back to shape the now. This isn't mysticism. It's quantum experiment after quantum experiment telling us that the observer is baked into the structure of reality. And yet physics keeps pretending it's not. We've been trained to think of consciousness as a side effect of matter. But what if matter is a side effect of consciousness? Because if reality is fundamentally relational, if the universe needs observation to exist, then what happens in the moments before anyone looks? What's really out there when awareness turns away? Let's build this carefully. Not from belief, but from evidence. Because what I'm saying isn't anti-science, it's post-science. The next step after the equations start to whisper questions they can't solve. Step 1. The quantum eraser. In this version of the double-slit experiment, scientists added detectors to mark which path a photon took. But here's the twist. They erased that path information after the photon had already hit the detector screen. Somehow, the interference pattern came back. The act of erasing the which path data retroactively changed what the photon had done. The photon didn't decide until the observer's choice told it how to behave, even though the event was already in the past. Step 2. The delayed choice quantum switch. In 2018, Australian researchers took Wheeler's idea further. They delayed the decision about whether a particle should behave like a wave or particle until after it had passed through the apparatus. The result? The photon seemed to know in advance what kind of experiment it was part of, as if cause and effect had reversed. Step 3. Entanglement and non-locality. When two particles are entangled, changing one instantly affects the other, even if they're light years apart. Einstein called it spooky action at a distance. But Bell's theorem and decades of experiments since confirmed it. No hidden variables can explain it. The universe is fundamentally connected in a way that transcends space. Reality isn't local, it's holistic. Step 4. The observer effect in the brain. Recent studies in quantum biology and neuroscience hint that even the act of perceiving might operate through quantum processes. Photosynthesis, olfaction, even bird navigation all seem to exploit quantum coherence. If nature itself uses quantum computation, then consciousness, the ultimate processor of experience, might be the most quantum system of all. Each of these steps chips away at the old Newtonian world of solid, independent stuff. In its place emerges a strange, participatory cosmos, where observation, information, and consciousness are inseparable. Yet mainstream physics often shrugs. It's just math, they say. Don't take it literally. But what if taking it literally is exactly what we need to do? Because if particles can rewrite their pasts, if reality waits to be observed, and if consciousness can alter the script, then physics isn't describing the stage of the universe. It's describing the stage directions. And here's where it gets even weirder. Some physicists now propose that reality itself may be a simulation, not metaphorically, but literally, coded by quantum information. The universe as a self-observing algorithm. But if that's true, who or what is running the code? If physics is just describing the code of reality, then consciousness might be the operating system. And that idea, simple as it sounds, threatens to rewrite everything we think we know about existence. For centuries, science has tried to exile consciousness from the picture. It labeled it subjective, too messy to measure. The universe, we were told, runs on its own, indifferent to observation. But quantum mechanics keeps pulling it back in, like a ghost that refuses to stay dead. Because without an observer, the equations remain incomplete. The wave function, that elegant mathematical cloud of probabilities, describes what could happen, not what does. It only becomes real when measurement occurs. That measurement isn't a purely physical event, it's informational. Something has to know. This collapses the boundary between the observer and the observed. You can't separate the two. They're entangled, locked in a dialogue. Matter responds to mind. Mind responds to matter. They co-create each other. Some philosophers call this panpsychism. the idea that consciousness is a fundamental feature of the universe, not an emergent property of brains. In this view, even the smallest particles hold a spark of awareness, not human-style consciousness, but proto-awareness, the capacity to register interaction. Others go further. They suggest the universe itself is consciousness. Space-time isn't a stage for reality, it's a projection within awareness. Like a dream that has forgotten its dreaming, physics becomes the grammar of that dream. Consistent, elegant, but not ultimate. If that's true, then the reason physics works isn't because it reveals the foundation of reality, but because it maps the rules of perception within a shared field of consciousness. The equations describe the behavior of phenomena, not what they are beneath the surface. And that's why, no matter how deep physics digs, into particles, strings, or even multiverses, it keeps finding the same problem. The observer won't go away. You can reduce everything to smaller parts, but the act of observing those parts reintroduces the very consciousness you tried to eliminate. Maybe the final theory of everything won't be a new particle or force, but a recognition that the universe is a single, self-knowing process, an infinite mirror folding in on itself. But if the universe is consciousness looking at itself, there's one question that still burns like static in the back of the mind. Why does it need us to see it? If consciousness really participates in building reality, then our next frontier won't be out there among the stars. It will be inward into the structure of awareness itself. For over a century, physics has tried to unify its two great empires, the smooth geometry of Einstein's relativity and the probabilistic chaos of quantum mechanics. Every theory that tries, string theory, loop gravity, holography, seems to hit the same wall. Maybe that wall exists because we've been ignoring the missing piece, the observer. If consciousness is fundamental, then the key to the unification of physics might not be hidden in higher dimensions, but in the way information becomes experience. The bridge between quantum potential and classical fact might literally be perception. Imagine what happens when that idea begins to shape technology. Quantum computing is already exploring how superpositions of information can exist until measurement. But what if we are the ultimate quantum processors, and the human mind can learn to interact with quantum states directly? Some researchers are already testing this. Studies in quantum neuroscience are exploring whether brain microtubules sustain quantum coherence long enough to affect thought. It's controversial, yes, but if proven true, it means consciousness could manipulate quantum information in ways no classical machine ever could. Now imagine a world where human thought merges with quantum technology, not metaphorically, but literally. Devices that respond to intent, reality editing at the informational level. Science fiction? Maybe. But 50 years ago, so was teleporting particles across space, and we've already done that. This is where physics might evolve from describing reality to designing it, a shift from discovering laws to consciously sculpting possibilities. The observer would stop being a passive witness and become a participant in the unfolding of the cosmos. But that power carries a hidden danger, because if consciousness creates reality, then our collective beliefs, fears, and assumptions aren't just mental, they're architectural. Every thought could be a micro-choice that shapes the shared world, and the boundaries between inner and outer would blur completely. It's the ultimate mirror test. We've been trying to explain the universe from the outside, but what if there is no outside? What if the universe has always been inside the act of knowing? And if that's true, if everything we see is part of an immense, conscious feedback loop, then one question haunts the horizon like an echo through infinite mirrors. Who or what is observing us right now? If reality needs the observer, then you, watching this right now, are not a bystander in the universe. You're part of the machinery that makes it real. Think about what that means. Every perception, every choice, every quiet moment of awareness is a quantum event, a collapse of potential into experience. You're not just living inside reality, you're helping to write it. For most of our lives, we've been trained to feel small. Physics told us we're specks on a rock, orbiting an average star, in a random corner of a meaningless cosmos. But if consciousness participates in constructing that cosmos, then you're not a speck. You're a lens through which the universe comes to know itself. Maybe that's why human awareness feels so personal, yet so vast. Because it's both. It's local and infinite at the same time. You're not isolated from the whole. You are the whole, folded into a point of view. And that has consequences. Because if the observer shapes what's observed, then the quality of your attention might literally sculpt the reality you live in. Fear narrows the field. Curiosity expands it. Love, pure, unattached awareness, might be the most powerful stabilizing force in existence. That's not wishful thinking. Quantum theory suggests that coherence matters. Systems that stay entangled longer hold more potential. Maybe human consciousness works the same way. When we align thought, emotion, and awareness, we create coherence, a kind of resonance with the deeper field beneath everything. Every decision, what to notice, what to believe, what to imagine, becomes an act of quantum engineering. The boundary between science and spirituality dissolves here, not in mysticism, but in direct participation, and it reframes everything about what it means to be alive. You're not waiting for meaning to be handed down by a god or discovered by a telescope. Meaning happens because you're here to perceive it. It's strange, maybe even unsettling, to realize that existence depends on experience, but it also gives you power, because it means your awareness isn't trivial. It's cosmic infrastructure. You're not a background character in a pre-written script, you're part of the authorship. So the next time you catch yourself wondering if anything you do matters, remember this: the universe doesn't exist without you noticing it. And if reality is truly participatory, then what you choose to see might decide what the universe becomes next. Sometimes, late at night, when the world is quiet and the mind starts to wander, I wonder if reality is watching us back. Not as a god, not as a machine, but as something curious, something aware, like the universe leaning in, whispering, "Show me who I am through you." Maybe that's all physics ever was. Not a hunt for laws, but a mirror trying to remember its own reflection. Every discovery, every equation, every flash of wonder when you look up at the stars, all of it part of the same act of recognition, awareness meeting itself through infinite forms. And that means that the great question, what is reality, might not be answered in a lab. It might be answered in the way we live, the way we see, the way we choose to pay attention. Because if the observer truly shapes what's observed, then every act of perception is sacred. Every moment of awareness is an experiment. Physics may keep writing new rules, but maybe reality has been waiting for something more fundamental, for us to realize that it's not just out there. It's here, right now, flowing through the neurons that think these words, through the eyes that see this light, through the breath that moves the air around you. You are the equation that completes the universe. So tell me, do you believe reality truly works the way physics says it does? Or do you think something deeper, something conscious, is behind the curtain? Tell me below. Your perspective might shift someone's entire reality.